Welcome to the Matters Podcast, where combat sports, mindset, and real-life lessons collide. Hosted by Dervin and Nate, we dive into Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, MMA, and the grind that shapes athletes inside and outside the mat. Every episode we bring stories, strategies, and raw conversations that fuel growth, resilience, and community. Stay tuned because it's more than a fight, it's a lifestyle. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is a tough one. This is about highlights. It's not about championship. It's not about who made it to the UFC or who went viral. This is about what happens after the spotlight fades. Because for every success story, there's our story we don't talk about. Stories about athletes who had all the talent, all the hype, but couldn't transition when the game was over. And some of those stories in addiction or worse. This episode is about understanding that reality so we don't repeat it. High school and the early career peak, we've all seen it. The phenom, the prodigy, the one everyone believes in. In combat sport is full of these stories. Look at someone like Penn, one of the most naturally gifted fighters ever. World champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, UFC champion in 2 weight classes, fought the best of the best. But after the peak, things can change. Legal issues, personal struggles, videos circulating online that didn't reflect the champion people once saw. And that's not to tear him down, that's to highlight something real. Talent alone doesn't protect you from what comes after. There's been several times we have seen fighters that they were able to become really good or athletes that were good in their respective career, but once they stop participating in that sport, it seems like they're just went down a different rabbit hole and they were able to apply the same thing to regular life, personal life. Identity crisis perhaps might be one of the causes. This is where things start to break, where your identity is tied to completely to being the fighter. What happens when you're not that anymore? That's an example is Leben. If you watch early UFC, you remember him, tough, aggressive, entertaining, build his identity on being able to take damage and keep going. He was known as the crippler. But outside the cage, he struggled heavily with alcoholism. He's openly talked about how fighting and the lifestyle around it fed into the identity. And when that structure wasn't there anymore, things spiraled. That same mindset that made him dangerous in the cage didn't translate well outside of it. He had some charges about assault weapons, something like that, after he had retired. Luckily, he was able to turn his life around. I'm not sure if he's sober now, but I've seen a couple of UFC events in which he is a referee, able to pivot into a different career after fighting. Next part we'll be looking at is the slippery slope. This is where it gets real. Substance abuse doesn't always start with rock bottom moment. Sometimes it starts with pain management. Look at Kerr. If you ever seen the Smashing Machine, you already know. NCAA wrestling champion, one of the most dominant early MMA fighters, physically unstoppable, but behind the scenes, he was battling addiction to painkillers. It started as a way to deal with his injuries, then it became something else. It almost destroyed his life. That's the scary part. In combat sport, pain is normal, injury is normal, pushing through is expected. So when substance enters the picture, it doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like part of the process until it's not. You use it to mask so much pain and be able to make it to the next day. But it seems that even though you don't compete anymore, don't do the sport anymore, it seems like it's still stuck in that cycle. For example, even the elite aren't immune. Even here's something people don't want to admit. This doesn't happen to athletes who didn't make it. It happens to champions too. Look at Jon Jones, arguably one of the greatest fighters of all time. Dominant champion, unmatched skill set, beat elite competition consistently. But outside the cage, legal issues, failed drug tests, public struggles with substance use. Now, to his credit, he was able to still compete and still won. But his career shows something important. Success doesn't eliminate these problems. If anything, it can amplify them. Perhaps you have more ample resources of bad things coming to you. You're able to get in trouble a lot easier because if you're winning, you don't feel the repercussions of those bad actions. Now here's an anecdote. I know this guy. I'll tell you guys a story. This is about a famous fighter. This is someone who you've seen on TV. This is someone real. Seen more than one occasion. Someone a lot closer to home. I know this guy back in the day. High school athlete, killer competitor. The type of person you hated competing against, but respected at the same time. He had that edge. You know what I mean. First one in the room, last one to leave. Always in shape, always locked in. On competition day, he was different. Calm, focused, dangerous. People talk about him like he was already written. Is he going D1? Is he going to go far? Is built for this? And honestly, we all believe it. But then life didn't follow that script. It didn't go where people expected. No big college career, no big spotlight. And slowly, just stopped hearing about him. At first, it seemed like a big deal that happens, right? Not everyone keeps competing, but then you start noticing little things. You hear, yeah, he's been going a lot lately. He's partying pretty hard. He's not really training anymore. And you think, all right, he's blowing off steam. Then he changes. You see him again, but he's not the same person. Discipline, gone. The focus, gone. The sharp look in his eye, long gone. It's like the thing that made him disappear. And one day you hear something heavier. No rumors anymore, real stuff. Substance abuse, trouble, struggling, and it hits you differently. Because this wasn't just some guy. This was someone who had everything: talent, work ethic, respect. And you start asking yourself, what happened? How does someone who go from that level to this? And the answer is simple. It's not just one bad decision. It's layers. It's losing structure, losing identity, not having direction, trying to fill that void with something, anything. Because the truth, when you're felt what it's like to compete at a high level, when you had purpose every single day, and people knew your name because of what you did, regular life can feel empty. And if you're not prepared for that transition, you start chasing something to replace that feeling, something to numb it, something to skip it. And sometimes that something takes over. I don't tell the stories to shame him. I don't tell the story to act like I'm better. I tell the story because this is real. And this doesn't just happen to other people. This happens to teammates, friends, training partners, people just like us. If you're listening to this right now, there's a chance you know someone like that too. Or maybe you see a little bit of that in yourself. If that's you, understand this. Your story didn't end when the sport did. You didn't miss your only shot of life. You were just in a chapter that nobody prepared you for. And you can still turn around, but start with being honest about where you're at and deciding that you're not going to let your best year be the only thing being remembered by you. Now, the ones we lost. This is the hardest part to talk about because not everyone gets a comeback story. Some people don't make it out. There are fighters, boxers, wrestlers, MMA athletes who had everything going for them and lost their lives to addiction or the lifestyle surrounding it. And a lot of times, it started the same way. Loss of identity, lack of direction, trying to cope with something internally. That's why this conversation matters, because once it goes too far, you don't always get another round. How to avoid this? Now, let's talk about what actually helps, because awareness without action doesn't change anything. Build an identity outside the cage. Even active fighters need this. You can be a competitor, a coach, a professional, a father, a friend, a creator. Don't wait until it's over to figure that out. Respect the mind like you respect the body. Athletes will rehab torn ligaments for 6 months, but ignore mental health for years. That's backwards. Talk to someone, process things. Don't just push through everything. Be careful what you normalize. In some fight cultures, drinking is normalized. It's okay to drink every once in a while, but not all the time. Painkillers are normalized. Partying after fights is normalized. The environment can quietly pull you in. Be aware of it. Stay connected with purpose. The athletes who transition well usually stay involved in the sport, mentor others, find new goals. They don't just stop, they evolve. At the end of the day, this is about judging athletes who struggle. It's about learning from their reality, because every name we mentioned today represents something bigger than themselves. They represent what can happen when identity, pressure, and lack of directions collide. If you're listening to this, you feel lost, you're not alone, but you do have a choice what comes next. Your story doesn't end when the crowd stops cheering. That's just where the next chapter begins. If this episode hits you in the way, share it, because this isn't just sports talk. This is real life, and this are conversations that can actually help people before it's too late. Stay disciplined, stay aware, and keep evolving. I'll catch you in the next one.